Welcome back to His Revenge, where we dive deep into the most gripping, real-life inspired tales of betrayal, justice, and sweet, sweet payback. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss these epic stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Today, we're unpacking a brand new revenge saga, The Inheritance Trap. Inspired by those chilling Reddit threads where family secrets unravel and con artists get their comeuppance. This one's got it all. A protective parent, a whirlwind romance, hidden fortunes, and a takedown that'll leave you cheering. Buckle up. This is a long one, clocking in at around 45 minutes. Let's get into it. A sprawling vineyard in Napa Valley, California. Rows of grapevines stretch out endlessly under the warm golden sun, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. The air is thick with the sweet scent of ripening fruit mixed with the earthy aroma of rich soil. Birds chirp overhead, and in the distance, rolling hills rise against a clear blue sky. This is where our story begins, with Elias Hawthorne, a 68-year-old widower who spent the last 40 years turning a modest plot of land into a thriving wine estate. Elias isn't your typical millionaire. He doesn't drive luxury cars or wear expensive suits. Instead, he cruises around in a beat-up old Jeep that's seen better days, covered in dust from the dirt roads. He dresses in faded overalls and sturdy work boots, and he still tends to his vines personally, clipping away at overgrown branches with calloused hands. But beneath that humble exterior lies a fortune built on savvy business decisions and a closely guarded secret that's kept his family safe from the poison of greed. Elias's wife, Sophia, passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart condition that no one saw coming. They had met when they were young, full of dreams and ambition, and together they built this vineyard from scratch. Back in the 1980s, they scraped together every penny they had to buy the land for just $50,000 at a time when Napa Valley was only beginning to gain fame for its wines. Now, decades later, the property has blossomed into something extraordinary, valued at over $6 million, with their award-winning wines being shipped to restaurants and collectors all across the country. But Elias never flaunted their success. Sophia had come from a family that was torn apart by bitter fights over inheritances, so they made a pact early on to live simply, invest their earnings wisely, and shield their only daughter, their daughter Mia, from the corrupting influence of visible wealth. Mia, now 29 years old, grew up immersed in the rhythm of the vineyard life. As a little girl, she would run between the rows of vines, her small hands helping her mother prune the grapes during the warm spring days. She learned the art of crushing grapes underfoot during the lively harvest festivals, where the whole family would laugh and work together under the autumn sun. After graduating from college with a degree in graphic design, she moved to the bustling city of San Francisco, where she landed a fulfilling job creating visuals for tech companies. She's creative and independent, but her bond with her father remained strong. Every weekend, she'd make the drive up the winding roads to the vineyard, her car kicking up dust as she arrived, always checking in on Elias, worried that the loneliness after Sophia's death might be weighing on him more than he let on. Elias appreciated her concern, but he assured him he was managing just fine, or at least that's what he thought until recently. Enter Julian Voss. Mia brought him home one crisp autumn evening about 8 months ago when the leaves were just starting to turn shades of red and orange. Julian, 35 years old, was suave and polished, with a charming smile that lit up his face and a confident demeanor that immediately put people at ease. He worked as a real estate consultant in the Bay Area, dealing with high-end properties and wealthy clients. As he shook Elias's hand firmly on the front porch of the old farmhouse, the evening light casting long shadows across the vineyard, Julian complimented the vintage Cabernet they sipped by the crackling fire in the living room. He asked all the right questions about the vineyard's history, showing genuine interest, or so it seemed. "Elias, where exactly does your land meet the neighbors? Those hills over there look prime for expansion, maybe even adding more vines or building something new." Mia would brush it off with a light laugh, her hair blowing in the wind. "He's just fascinated by the wine world, Dad. City guys like him dream of escaping to a life like this, surrounded by nature and tradition." Elias nodded politely, forcing a smile, but deep inside, something began to nag at him. He'd spent 35 years in agricultural engineering before dedicating himself full-time to the vineyard, developing systems that revolutionized how crops were irrigated. He knew patterns all too well: the predictable cycles of weather, the subtle signs of pest outbreaks, and the telltale behaviors of people with hidden agendas. Julian's questions weren't random chit-chat, they were deliberate probes, like someone mapping out territory for a conquest.
The engagement came like a sudden storm, hitting fast and hard. Only 5 months into their dating, Julian proposed during a romantic sunset picnic right in the heart of the vines. The sky was painted in hues of pink and purple as he got down on one knee, a sparkling ring in hand, and Mia's eyes widened in surprise and delight. She called Elias that very night, her voice bubbling with uncontainable joy over the phone. "Dad, he gets me completely. We're thinking of having a spring wedding right here at the vineyard, with the ceremony under the old arbor." Elias congratulated her warmly, his words steady. But that night, as he sat alone in his study overlooking the moonlit rows of grapes, the vines swaying gently in the night breeze, he couldn't shake the growing unease. Why the rush to tie the knot? And why did Julian always circle back to those same questions about the land's boundaries, as if he were mentally measuring every inch? The vineyard wasn't just a piece of land to Elias, it was Sophia's enduring legacy, a living testament to their shared dreams and hard work. They had poured their hearts and souls into every aspect of it, from planting the first seedlings to bottling their inaugural vintage. And quietly, without fanfare, Elias had amassed far more wealth than anyone outside his inner circle knew. His patents from those engineering days on innovative irrigation systems were now used in vineyards and farms worldwide, bringing in steady royalties year after year. On top of that, smart investments in early tech stocks had compounded over time. The total assets? Around $10 million, carefully tucked away in trusts and diversified accounts. Mia knew the family was comfortable. The vineyard turned a reliable profit from wine sales and tours, but she had no idea about the full extent of the fortune. Elias had always wanted her to forge her own path in life, unburdened by the shadows of inherited wealth or the expectations that came with it. As the wedding plans ramped up in earnest, the vineyard buzzed with activity. Tents were ordered for 150 guests, a string quartet was booked to play soft melodies during the ceremony, and tastings were arranged featuring the best bottles from their private cellar. Julian's involvement deepened with each passing week. He'd show up unannounced, clipboard in hand, suggesting layouts and improvements. One sunny morning in early spring, as workers set up sample tables under the shade of the oaks, Julian pulled Elias aside near the western fence. "Elias, we could clear that back lot over there for more parking space for the guests. How far does your property extend in that direction anyway?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. Once again, it was back to the boundaries. Elias felt his gut twist like a vine caught in a storm. He decided it was time to act. The next day, under a cloudy sky that threatened rain, he called his old friend and attorney, Victor Reyes. "Victor, I need a discreet background check on Mia's fiancé, Julian Voss, real estate consultant in the Bay Area." Victor hesitated on the line, his voice concerned. "Elias, are you sure about this? Mia seems head over heels in love." But Elias insisted, his resolve firm. A week later, Victor's detailed report arrived via secure email, and Elias read it in the quiet of his study, the only sound the ticking of an old clock. On paper, Julian checked out perfectly.
a licensed consultant with a clean record, no arrests or red flags in public databases. But when Victor's team dug deeper, a troubling pattern emerged. 2 prior engagements, both to daughters from affluent families deeply rooted in the wine country. Both relationships had ended mysteriously right after Julian became involved in sensitive family business discussions. There were no formal charges or lawsuits, just hushed whispers in elite circles, labeling him a gold digger who vanished when suspicions arose. Elias felt a cold chill run down his spine as he pored over the details. He reached out discreetly to one of the ex-fiancé's fathers, a rival vintner he'd met at industry events. Over a confidential phone call, the man confided off the record. Julian asked way too many pointed questions about our property deeds and valuations. It smelled like he was plotting to flip the assets after inheritance kicked in. We cut ties quietly to avoid scandal. Mia herself had no substantial wealth yet. Her graphic design job paid well, but not enough to attract someone like Julian. Unless, of course, he believed she'd inherit the vineyard one day, or worse, if he'd somehow uncovered Elias's hidden patents and royalties through his real estate connections. Elias agonized over his next steps, pacing the wooden floors of his farmhouse late into the night, the creaks echoing his turmoil. Should he tell Mia outright and risk her accusing him of meddling in her happiness? She was so radiant after her last breakup, a toxic relationship with an artist who had drained her emotionally and left her doubting her judgment. No, Elias decided he needed concrete proof to avoid shattering her trust in him. That's when he hired a private investigator named Lena Torres, a former cop with a sharp eye for digital trails and undercover work. "Get me everything you can," Elias instructed her during their first meeting in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Napa, the steam from their coffees rising between them. Lena didn't disappoint. She started with Julian's online footprint, which appeared spotless at first glance. But as she delved into patterns, red flags popped up everywhere. Late-night searches on his devices for terms like Napa land values, California inheritance laws, and power of attorney for elderly parents. Then came the breakthrough, a bugged conversation captured through a clever ruse. Lena had a contact accidentally bump into Julian at a coffee shop, slipping a discreet tracker into his phone case during the distraction. It was an ethical gray area, but it paid off. Elias listened to the recording alone in his wine cellar, the cool, dim space surrounded by oak barrels filled with aging vintages, the faint scent of fermenting grapes in the air.
Julian's voice came through clearly on the audio. "Yeah, the old man's vineyard is pure gold. He bought it dirt cheap back in the 80s, and now it's worth millions with all the development pressure. Mia's completely clueless about his patents. Royalties are pouring in every quarter. I'll marry her, play the long game for a year or two, get the old guy to sign over management rights under the pretense of helping out. Accidents happen all the time in vineyards, a slip on wet ground after rain, a malfunction with the heavy equipment during harvest." The other voice belonged to a buddy named Derek. "You're ruthless, man. What if she catches on before you cash out?" Julian laughed coldly. "By then, the divorce settlement will split everything nicely. The last 2 marks were close calls, but this one's isolated out in the country. No swarm of savvy family lawyers sniffing around to spoil it." Rage boiled up inside Elias like a fermenting batch gone wrong, hot and uncontrollable at first. But he forced himself to stay calm, breathing deeply in the cellar's shadows. Revenge, he knew, needed precision and patience, much like pruning vines at just the right time to ensure the best yield of grapes. Elias immediately looped in Victor and Lena for a strategy session, meeting them at a secluded spot overlooking the valley, where the vines below looked like a green patchwork quilt. "We have to expose him right at the wedding," Elias declared, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "Mia needs to hear it straight from the source, no room for doubts or denials." They planned every detail with meticulous care, like crafting a fine wine blend. Hidden microphones were installed in key spots around the ceremony area, disguised among the flower arrangements and tent poles. Backup evidence packets were prepared, containing printouts of emails, search histories, and the audio recording, ready to distribute to guests if needed. All the while, Elias played the part of the trusting future father-in-law to perfection, even scheduling financial chats with Julian to keep him hooked. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden glow over the vineyard, Julian arrived with a sleek briefcase full of documents. They sat in Elias's study, the room filled with books on viticulture and old family photos. "You're absolutely right, Julian," Elias said, feigning interest. "At my age, proper estate planning is crucial. Show me those trust structures you've been talking about." Julian beamed, spreading out the papers on the desk. "This power of attorney form would let me step in if you ever need assistance with day-to-day management. And look here, these setups offer massive tax breaks, potentially saving you hundreds of thousands." Elias nodded thoughtfully, signing dummy versions of the documents just to bait him further. "And about those property boundaries you've mentioned so often, are you thinking of subdividing parts of the land?" Julian's eyes sparkled with barely concealed greed. "It's a smart move, Elias. We could sell off peripheral parcels for quick cash while keeping the core vineyard intact. As Mia's husband, I'd be happy to handle all the details for her." The wedding week finally arrived, and the vineyard transformed into a whirlwind of preparation. Florists arrived with truckloads of fresh blooms, arranging vibrant bouquets of roses and lilies that perfumed the air. Caterers set up long tables laden with gourmet appetizers, and the string quartet practiced their melodies under the arbor, the notes floating across the fields. Mia glowed with excitement, twirling in her wedding dress during fittings, oblivious to the undercurrents. Elias feigned enthusiasm, helping with last-minute setups, but inside his heart was in turmoil. The night before the big day, as stars twinkled above the dark vines, Mia confided in him on the porch swing. "Dad, Julian's perfect for me. I know Mom would have loved him. He appreciates the simple things, just like she did." Elias hugged her tightly, his throat constricting with unspoken words. "She'd want nothing more for you to be truly happy, Mia." The wedding day dawned perfect, with the vineyard in full bloom under a brilliant spring sun. The grapevines were lush and green, blossoms dotting the landscape like confetti, and guests arrived in sundresses and tailored suits, mingling with glasses of chilled champagne in hand. Laughter and chatter filled the air as people admired the views, some wandering the paths between the rows. Elias walked Mia down the petal-strewn aisle, her white veil fluttering in the gentle breeze, the scent of fresh flowers enveloping them. She whispered softly, her voice full of emotion. "Thanks for everything, Dad, for this place, for being here." He squeezed her hand reassuringly, though his own heart was breaking at what he knew was coming. At the altar, adorned with cascading vines and ribbons, the vows began under the watchful eyes of 150 guests. The officiant spoke warmly about love and commitment, the quartet's music swelling in the background. It was Julian's turn. "I, Julian, take thee, Mia, to have and to hold." But then Mia hesitated, her face suddenly paling as if she'd seen a ghost. In a twist Elias hadn't anticipated, she reached into her bouquet with trembling fingers and slipped Elias a small folded note. Time seemed to freeze as he unfolded it. "Dad, I overheard him last night. Please stop this now." The world around them blurred for a moment. Elias stood up slowly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Hold on, everyone. Mia, what's going on?" She turned to the crowd, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "I heard you, Julian. Last night I went to surprise you at your hotel, and I overheard your phone call with Derek. You were laughing about managing Dad's estate, causing some kind of accident to speed up the inheritance process." Gasps rippled through the guests like a wave, chairs scraping as people leaned forward in shock. Julian's face drained of color, stammering desperately. "This is a complete misunderstanding. It's just wedding nerves talking. She's stressed."
But Elias gave the prearranged signal, and suddenly, hidden speakers embedded in the arbor blared the incriminating recording for all to hear, Julian's voice detailing his cold-blooded plan, word for word. Chaos erupted instantly, women clutching their pearls, men standing up in outrage, phones whipping out to capture the moment. Julian lunged forward in a panic, trying to grab the microphone, but two off-duty sheriff deputies, old friends of Elias from the local vineyard community, seated incognito in the crowd, were on him in seconds, pinning his arms and slapping on handcuffs. "Julian Wass, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted exploitation," one deputy announced firmly, as flashes from cameras lit up the scene. Meanwhile, Derek, who had been standing smugly as best man, bolted towards the parking lot, his tuxedo jacket flapping. He didn't get far. Lena, positioned strategically by the cars in a caterer's uniform as a disguise, tackled him to the ground with expert precision, gravel crunching under them. Guests buzzed with whispers and shouts, some rushing to comfort Mia, others demanding explanations. Victor emerged from the crowd, calmly distributing the evidence folders to key witnesses, each packet bursting with printouts of emails, timelines, and transcripts.
Julian screamed threats of lawsuits and false accusations as he was dragged away, his polished facade crumbling into desperation. Mia collapsed into Elias's arms right there at the altar, sobbing uncontrollably, her wedding dress pooling around her like fallen petals. In the aftermath, the once festive vineyard turned into a scene of controlled pandemonium. Police cruisers arrived with lights flashing but sirens off, officers taking statements from stunned guests under the tents. Some attendees lingered in shock, sharing hushed conversations over abandoned champagne flutes, while others left quickly, eager to spread the gossip back in their social circles. The caterers quietly packed up the untouched feast, platters of artisanal cheeses, fresh salads from the garden, and roasted meats, the aromas now mingling with the tension in the air. Mia confronted Julian one last time as he sat cuffed in the back of a squad car, her eyes red from tears. "How could you do this? I trusted you with my heart." His mask finally cracked completely. "You were supposed to be my ticket out of mediocrity, the perfect setup." Elias held Mia close on the porch steps as the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks over the quieting vineyard. "You're strong, just like your mom," he whispered, stroking her hair. Months later, Julian was formally charged with conspiracy to defraud, attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and related crimes. He took a plea deal to avoid trial, 7 years of strict probation, full restitution of all investigation costs amounting to tens of thousands, and a lifetime ban from working in real estate or any financial advisory role. Derek, his accomplice, received a 3-year prison sentence for his active involvement in the scheme. Mia chose to stay at the vineyard for several months, using the time to heal in the familiar embrace of home. She attended therapy sessions weekly, working through the layers of betrayal and gaslighting, slowly rebuilding her sense of self and trust in others. Let's pause here and really unpack the psychology behind all this, because it's fascinating how these dynamics play out in real life. Con artists like Julian operate by preying on the most fundamental human need, trust. They mirror their victims' deepest desires and dreams, creating an illusion of perfect compatibility. In Julian's case, he presented himself as the ideal partner for Mia, appreciative of the vineyard life, supportive of her career, all while calculating every move. Elias's gut instinct that something was off, that's not paranoia. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism honed from years of observing patterns in both nature and people. Our brains are wired to detect inconsistencies, even if we can't always articulate them right away. Mia's initial denial is equally common in cases of betrayal trauma. When someone we love reveals a darker side, the mind often goes into protection mode, rationalizing red flags or doubting our own perceptions to avoid the pain of reality. It's called cognitive dissonance,
holding two conflicting beliefs like he's perfect and he's plotting against my family, and the brain twists itself to resolve it. But once the truth breaks through, as it did for Mia at the last moment, the emotional flood can be overwhelming. Compare this to those viral Reddit tales that inspire stories like ours. Think about that MITA post where a protective dad exposed his son's gold-digging girlfriend during a family Thanksgiving dinner, complete with printed evidence passed around the table. Or the epic pro-revenge thread about a family faking elaborate wealth to lure in a con artist, only to flip the script at a fake will-reading ceremony. These stories hook us because they tap into schadenfreude, that guilty pleasure we feel watching the wicked get their just desserts, combined with deep empathy for the betrayed. We root for the underdogs, the quiet heroes like Elias, who use intelligence over brute force. To add even more depth, let's flash back to Elias and Sophia's early days, way back in 1985. They were just a young couple in their 20s, full of optimism but short on cash. They scrimped and saved for years, eating ramen and skipping vacations until they could afford that initial plot of land in Napa. The day they closed the deal, they celebrated with a cheap bottle of sparkling wine on the bare dirt, toasting to their future under a vast, starry sky. Sophia turned to Elias and said, "This is our dream, love. Let's build it together. But promise me, no matter how big it gets, we won't let greed poison what we have." Their first harvest was a labor of love, Sophia, pregnant with Mia, carefully tending the young vines while Elias rigged up his homemade irrigation prototypes. Little Mia, as a toddler, would toddle through the rows, giggling as she helped by stomping on fallen grapes, her tiny feet stained purple. These memories fueled Elias's fierce protectiveness. The vineyard wasn't just property, it was a tapestry of their family's history. Now, on the flip side, Julian's backstory adds layers to his villainy. He grew up in a struggling family on the fringes of the Bay Area, resenting the wealthy elite he saw flaunting their fortunes. His first con was small time at age 25, charming his way into a minor inheritance scam with a distant relative, but it escalated over the years to targeting engagements, fueled by a toxic mix of narcissism and deep-seated insecurity. Psychologically, it's classic. The con artist projects confidence to mask inner voids, always chasing the next big score to feel validated. Diving deeper into Lena's investigative work really shows the meticulous effort behind the scenes. She started with stakeouts at Julian's sleek downtown office, blending into the crowd in casual attire, noting his meetings with shady land developers who specialized in quick flips of rural properties. Using legal access to public records, she uncovered his hidden financial ties, offshore accounts hinting at laundered gains from past schemes. Then, tracking down his exes, one woman, still heartbroken years later, met Lena in a park and warned tearfully, "He charms you until you're hooked, then everything becomes a calculation. I lost not just money, but my faith and love." Elias's internal conflict during this time was intense. He'd pace the vineyard paths at night, the cool air filled with chirps of crickets, questioning if he was just being an overprotective, paranoid old man. But as the evidence mounted, Julian's secret lunches with developers, discussing prime Napa parcels ripe for inheritance plays, his doubts faded, replaced by steely determination.
The wedding preparations were a whirlwind of details that built the emotional stakes even higher. Florists transformed the grounds with arches of blooming jasmine and peonies, their fragrance wafting on the breeze. Caterers unloaded crates of local produce, setting up elegant tables with crisp linens and crystal glasses, each place setting featuring a small bottle of the vineyard's signature wine. Mia spent hours in fittings, her dress a flowing gown of silk that caught the light beautifully, while Julian hovered, suggesting upgrades like expanded guest areas that subtly hinted at his plans to sell off land later. Elias, playing his role, even planted subtle clues in conversations. "Julian, have you ever thought about buying your own land around here?"
Julian's eager slip. "Oh, after the inheritance comes through, maybe we could look into it together." As the officiant prompted Julian's vows, Mia's hand shook slightly on her bouquet. Her voice, when she spoke, started as a whisper but grew stronger. "I can't do this. I heard you, Julian. Everything. Last night on the phone with Derek, you joked about how Dad was ripe for an accident to hurry along the inheritance. I recorded it all on my phone right outside your door." The crowd's reaction was electric. Aunts gasping in horror, clutching their handbags. Friends whipping out phones to film. A few men standing ready to intervene. Julian's face twisted in panic. "Baby, you're twisting my words. It was just guy talk, nothing serious." Elias stepped forward calmly. "No more lies, son. You've targeted the wrong family this time." The speakers kicked in, amplifying Julian's recorded confession, every damning word echoing across the vineyard, silencing even the birds. The post-reveal chaos unfolded like a dramatic movie scene. Police efficiently cordoned off areas, taking detailed statements from witnesses who recounted their shock. Guests milled about in clusters, some offering hugs to Mia, others debating the audacity of the scheme over half-eaten hors d'oeuvres. Elias stood protectively by his daughter as she gave her tearful account to the officers, the sunset casting long shadows that mirrored the day's dark turn. In the healing months that followed, Mia immersed herself in the vineyard's rhythms as a form of therapy. She'd rise at dawn to help with pruning, the snip of shears, therapeutic against the betrayal. Elias taught her the intricacies of his patents over evening dinners, explaining the engineering behind the irrigation systems with sketches on napkins. Her therapy sessions, held in a cozy office overlooking the hills, focused on unpacking the gaslighting, how Julian had manipulated her perceptions step by step. Eventually, Mia dipped her toe back into dating, but with newfound caution, background checks, and slow paces. Elias watched proudly as she grew wiser, sadder perhaps, but unbreakable. Here are some key takeaways to ponder. Watch for red flags in relationships, like unusually rushed engagements or persistent financial probing. Always protect vulnerable elders from exploitation through legal safeguards like trusts. And from Reddit wisdom, background checks aren't paranoia. They can save hearts and fortunes. What would you have done in Elias's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss. This tale echoes other gripping stories, like that pro-revenge thread where a sister exposed her brother's scammer wife at a lavish baby shower, passing out dossiers mid-celebration, or the nuclear revenge saga of a family faking immense wealth to ensnare a con, culminating in a staged inheritance reveal that left the fraudster humiliated. Psychologically, these narratives highlight betrayal blindness, the tendency for victims to overlook signs to preserve emotional stability, only for truth to shatter the illusion. To immerse you further in the world building, Napa Valley's beauty is unparalleled. Morning fog rolls in like a soft blanket over the vines, lifting to reveal dew-kissed grapes. Harvest festivals bring communities together with music, food trucks, and grape-stomping contests under colorful tents. Elias's daily routine grounds the story, rising at dawn for pruning, tasting fermenting batches in the cellar with a critical palate, ensuring every bottle honors Sophia's vision. Julian's past cons add chilling parallels. His first victim, a young heiress, lost a family cottage to his schemes. Another escaped narrowly when her brother intervened with private detectives. Reflecting on it all, wealth is indeed a double-edged sword. It provides protection and opportunities, but it also attracts sharks circling for a bite. Sophia taught the family well: live authentically, love fiercely, and let actions speak louder than bank accounts. From Mia's shifted perspective, the experience was transformative. She once saw stars in Julian's eyes, but they turned out to be glittering dollar signs. Elias's choice to stay silent until the end, it was his greatest gift, allowing her to learn and grow on her own terms, emerging stronger. On the legal front, let's break down the charges for educational value. Conspiracy to defraud involves proving intent to deceive for gain, backed by the recordings and patterns. Power of attorney abuse laws in California are strict, protecting seniors from such exploitation. Julian's restitution included paying back every cent of the investigation fees, totaling over $50,000, a bitter pill for his empty pockets.
The father-daughter bonding in the aftermath brought heartwarming moments. They'd share harvests together, hands dirty from soil as they picked ripe clusters, laughing over old family jokes. Evenings were for stories about Sophia, her infectious laugh, her passion for planting wildflowers that now bloomed freely. They expanded her memorial garden, adding stone paths and benches engraved with her favorite quotes, turning it into a sanctuary of remembrance. For an intriguing twist, consider alternate scenarios. If Mia hadn't overheard that fateful call, Elias had a backup plan ready, activating the speakers during the reception toasts, exposing Julian mid-speech to the entire crowd. Or what if Julian had sensed the trap? The story could have veered into a tense cat-and-mouse game across the vineyard grounds. Share your own revenge stories in the comments. Have you ever uncovered a betrayal like this? Like the video if you want more long-form tales like the inheritance trap. In the end, the vineyard stands as resilient as ever, its vines thriving under the care of Elias and Mia. True revenge isn't just about exposure. It's about reclaiming your peace and emerging unbreakable. Thanks for joining me on this journey. See you next time on His Revenge.